couple of weeks ago, I made a video arguing that what we're going through with the coronavirus response and the lockdowns and the maskings and the closures and the end of jobs and the end of school and the handouts and all of it, the self-isolation, all of it is tantamount to torture according to Amnesty International's own definition and categories of what counts towards coercive or torturous treatment towards prisoners of war. In today's video, I want to give you some more evidence to support that claim. And it comes to us from an expert on narcissism, an expert on psychology in general, Sam Vaknin. Sam wrote this article, The Body as Torture Chamber, in January 2011, or at least that's when it was published in Recovering the Self, a journal of hope and healing. In this article, Sam Vaknin compares the world of a chronically ill patient and their interactions with the medical system to being tortured, that their own body is the device of torture. And in this current paradigm that we're living under with this supposed global pandemic, I believe what they are doing is capitalizing on that psychology that they understand about the doctor-patient relationship, and they are making us all into patients and treating us accordingly. This, of course, is another method of torturing someone. This should be definitely against the Geneva Conventions. It should be against any form of human decency to treat someone who is not sick as if they are sick. There are psychological conditions named for that. One of them is Munchausen syndrome by proxy, where a parent gets so much control and so much attention from having a sick child that the parent makes the child sick by giving them little doses of poison or via other methods. This seems to me what's happening on a gigantic scale with the coronavirus response. So without any further ado, I would like to read excerpts from Sam's article that he wrote, and I will also link in the description box to the full thing so you can read it for yourself. I will also link to Sam reading his own article on his YouTube channel. It's a very interesting channel. I've learned a lot from Dr. Vaknin. I don't know if he calls himself doctor, over the years, so I hope that you will get a lot out of it as well. The article begins, "There is one place in which one's privacy, intimacy, integrity, and inviolability are guaranteed: one's body. The process of chronic disease invades, defiles, and desecrates this shrine. It does so publicly, enhancing the sufferer's sense of helplessness and utter humiliation. Hence the all-pervasive, long-lasting, and frequently irreversible effects and outcomes of long-term, intractable illness. The medical system, the medical tyranny, the techno-fascists, that's the final frontier for them. They want to conquer our body. They want to conquer our minds." So Sam's article was from 2011, and unfortunately, I think it's only more pertinent now than it was back then. In a way, the torture victim's own body is rendered his worst enemy. It is corporeal agony that compels the patient to mutate, his identity to fragment, his ideals and principles to crumble. The body becomes an accomplice of the affliction, an uninterruptible channel of communication, a treasonous, poisoned territory. Just boom. Consider the fact that that is happening to all of us now. They are considering all of us patients now. They are asking us to behave as if we are contagious, as if we are broken, as if we are dangerous. And this is all done publicly, like he says in this paragraph, even though we are not actually sick. The powers that be are invading our body with their healthcare. They are asking us to demonstrate, wear masks, use hand sanitizer, get in line, stay 6 feet away from each other. And look what he says happens. Our identities fragment. We mutate. Our ideals and principles crumble. And who hasn't felt that happening around them? Everybody is under at least low-grade stress, if not starting to break from the extreme psychological manipulation they're putting us through, along with, of course, the economic stuff, the financial stuff, the interpersonal stuff, social stuff, and real health concerns. that are either being overblown or ignored. They're locking us into this dance that a chronically ill person has with the medical system, the helpless relationship, the dependent relationship that they have with that system. I continue reading. It fosters a humiliating dependency of the abused on medicines, doctors, and bureaucracies. The impersonal character of modern healthcare objectifies the patient, further adding to his or her alienation. As he sees it, he is rendered bestial not by the inadequacies of society and medicine, but by his own flesh. I certainly see that happening. The objectification of people, it's near complete now. We are alienated from our bodies because we are not sick, yet we must behave as if we are. We're being degraded. We're being dehumanized. We are being rendered bestial. I talked about that in the torture video, where our main concerns now, whether we really realize it or not, are survival-based. And we are getting to see one another as if we're dangerous or enemies or competitors, instead of being more or less brothers and sisters in our countries and in our communities. It's tragic what they're doing. And it goes along with the Amnesty International report on torture's description of torture, where they described Biederman and his study of prisoners of war. And he said that the Chinese and the communists were not magic when they broke the prisoners. They weren't using any special techniques. They were just inducing the 3 Ds: dependency, debility, and dread. Can you see that in the coronavirus response? Can you see that in a chronically ill patient? Their dependency on the doctors. Let's continue reading Sam Vaknin's article. Illness robs the patient of the most basic modes of relating to reality and thus is the equivalent of cognitive death. Space and time are warped by sleep deprivation. The self-I is shattered. The chronically sick have nothing familiar to hold on to. Family, home, personal belongings, loved ones, language, name. Gradually, they lose their mental resilience and sense of freedom. They feel alien, unable to communicate, relate, attach, or empathize with others. Terminal or debilitating illness splinters early childhood grandiose narcissistic fantasies of uniqueness, omnipotence, invulnerability, and impenetrability. But it enhances the fantasy of merger with an idealized and omnipotent, though not benign, other, the medical doctor, often the inflictor of agony. And there we have Dr. Fauci. Here we have some experiments from Dr. Mengele. And here we have families trying to cope with the fact that they've got their elderly loved ones locked up in nursing homes where they can't even visit them, can't help them through their illnesses, can't help them through anything with dignity. These COVID response officials are doing exactly what the medical system would do to a chronically ill patient. They are hooking us in so that their worldview is the dominant one. They are scaring us that if we don't behave and we don't listen to them, then things will get worse. They make us complicit. They make us participate in the torture because we're scared, because this is about our health, because we feel like we don't have enough knowledge. So they break down our ability to take care of ourselves. To continue. Chronic disease has no cutoff date. The sounds, the voices, the smells, the sensations reverberate long after each episode has ended, both in nightmares and in waking moments. The patient's ability to trust the rationality and benevolence of the world has been irrevocably undermined. Social institutions are perceived as precariously poised on the verge of an ominous Kafkaesque mutation. Nothing is either safe or credible anymore. Surely, you can see the obvious way that is playing out in all of our lives now. All of us dependent on this system that isn't making any sense. And it's very precarious. We don't know what they're going to do next. In the case of a chronically ill patient, they don't know if their body is going to take a turn for the worse suddenly, if changing a medicine will hurt them. But they have to do what the doctors say, not only because they are accustomed to depending on experts, but because there's not another alternative in our society. They've literally cut off other routes. We can sort of use some natural remedies, but they vilify that in the mainstream media and in the quote-unquote mainstream science. In Canada, you can't choose to go to a private clinic unless you leave the country. You can't get around their prescriptions, their idea of what is the right course of action for you. And think of the COVID response. 15 days at first, then 30 days, just a little longer, just wear a mask. This might last for years. This is the new normal. They let us into big box stores, but they don't let us into small family restaurants or bakeries or hardware stores. They are releasing prisoners, dangerous prisoners, out into the streets, but they are arresting people who are not complicit with the medical tyranny, who simply don't want to wear a mask, who simply don't want to use hand sanitizer, who simply state out loud that they don't believe the numbers. They don't believe this is a dangerous pandemic. For Black Lives Matter protesters, they can go to group events and it's no problem, but you can't have big weddings or parties in your yard, or they'll come around and harass and intimidate you. And the list goes on. The list goes on. These people who are doing that and who are telling you you're sick when you're not, or you're potentially sick when you're not, they're the same people we have to appeal to get our freedom back. This is torture and will break your mind. As they say in the Amnesty International report on torture, critical to the entire procedure of getting a patient to be dependent on the doctor or getting a citizen to be dependent on public health officials, critical to the entire procedure is the fact that the treatment is constantly varied. There is no time when a prisoner can be sure that he is through with a particular ordeal. Doesn't that describe our situation exactly? And that would be the same for a patient, a chronic pain patient, a chronic illness patient, under the care of a doctor who maybe does not even know how to make the patient better, but isn't honest about it, or who doesn't really have an interest in making the patient better. I argue that these COVID people, the people who want this pandemic to keep going, which is people like Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, Anthony Fauci, who's going to benefit from the treatments and the vaccines, Bill Gates, who's going to get billions and billions more dollars from the vaccine, they don't want anybody to get better. They just want the narrative to continue so that they can continue to coerce us into compliance. Make it so painful for us to resist them that we eventually compromise at somewhere along the point where they're happy with. Okay, at least they're wearing masks. Okay, at least they're yelling at each other for not wearing masks. Okay, at least they're starting to switch to digital currency. Okay, at least they're willing to take the vaccine so their kids can go to school. It's a very sick and demented process they're putting us through. To continue with Sam Vaknin's article, being treated for an illness is the ultimate act of perverted intimacy. The medical professional invades the victim's body or probes his psyche. Bedridden, deprived of contact with others, starved for human interactions, the patient bonds with his caregiver, hence pathological phenomena such as the Munchausen syndrome. Trauma bonding, akin to the Stockholm syndrome, is about hope and the search for meaning in the brutal and indifferent nightmarish universe of the hospital or the outpatient clinic. That all applies to what we're going to. We're all in an open-air outpatient clinic right now. Wouldn't you say? Stockholm syndrome, by the way, comes from an incident in Sweden where a group of people were taken hostage, and in the end, after days of it, they started to defend their kidnappers. They started to defend and identify with the hostage takers. Why? Because the hostage takers were their only route to freedom. That's what they thought. They should obey them. They should listen to them. They should agree with their arguments. And after this goes on for a period of time, you forget that there's another way because you're so traumatized. You forget that you can hold on to yourself through the process and work towards a rescue. And I believe with COVID, it's even more dangerous because they're all telling us there's no rescue. There's nobody coming for you. We have to fight the invisible enemy, and you're part of it. And we're in a war against an unseeable surprise attack enemy. The medical system invades your body, probes your psyche, deprives you of contact with others, starves you for human interactions. And thus you bond with them. You bond with the doctors and Anthony Fauci and the World Health Organization, whatever punk they trot out on the news who probably doesn't even have a medical degree, is just some kind of public health wog policy guy. I feel like that's what we're living through right now. The bonding is especially strong when the doctor and the patient form a dyad and collaborate in the rituals and acts of treatment. For instance, when the victim is asked to select the implements and the types of surgery to be inflicted, or to choose between two equally vile and agonizing cures in quotation marks. Well, I see that all over the place. Here, guys, you can have a nice plastic face shield or a medical mask or a mask with watermelons on it, or you can look like something out of like a science fiction horror movie like this guy down here. You choose your implement of torture. Here's another false choice between two equally vile and agonizing quote-unquote cures, with this Kentucky couple put under house arrest, forced to wear ankle monitors for refusing to sign self-quarantine order because apparently they tested positive. You can voluntarily imprison yourself, or we'll do it for you with this piece of kit, all because you don't believe you're sick, and we are insisting that you are. And what about the vaccines? You have a choice. You can just not send your kids to school, or you can get a vaccine. That is not a real choice. That is two equally vile and agonizing quote-unquote cures. And of course, now they're stopping people from even getting food at the grocery store if they won't wear a face mask, citing the fact that it's a private company and it can do what it wants. Well, this is fascism, people. This is why fascism works so well. The government wants to implement draconian measures, but it can't because it's against the Constitution. It's against all of the laws. But if they support a private company through giving them government contracts and giving them tax breaks, then the company is happy to oblige, break the law, violate the Constitution, because technically it doesn't apply to them. Okay, I'm getting away from Sam's article. Let's go back to it. Obsessed by endless ruminations, demented by pain and a continuum of sleeplessness, the patient regresses, shedding all but the most primitive defense mechanisms: splitting, narcissism, dissociation, projective identification, introjection, and cognitive dissonance. The sick person constructs an alternative world, suffering in extremis from depersonalization and derealization, and all kinds of other things. Some patients come to crave pain because pain is like a decoration for valor and courage under fire, something to be proud of and flaunt. That to me is our victim culture. It's our victim culture. I'm the most hurt. I'm the most weak. I was the most traumatized. That's how we perceive that we get points and strength in this culture, that our social status is actually elevated by being the weakest. It's a total inversion. Illness can be perceived as reprogramming the patient to succumb to an alternative exegesis of the world proffered by the medical profession. Well, boom! It is an act of deep, indelible, traumatic indoctrination. The sick typically swallow whole and assimilate the doctor's point of view and their opinions, regarding the patients as objects, statistics, or corpses in the making, and at times, as a result, are rendered suicidal, self-destructive, or self-defeating. That is exactly what's happening right now. We are moving from one worldview to the next, and the next worldview is all about the medical system and their idea of how the world should work. Here's a quote by Thomas Jefferson. I did not confirm that this was the right quote, but if people let government decide which foods they eat and medicines they take, their bodies will soon be in as sorry a state as are the souls of those who live under tyranny. Back to the article. The sick develop compulsive rituals to fend off obsessive thoughts. Depression and anxiety are very common. Self-directed aggression, also occurs. The patients feel ashamed and guilty. His sense of self-worth and self-esteem are crippled. Well, that is exactly what the torturers want to achieve. This is an excerpt from the CIA's Kubark Counterintelligence Interrogation Manual. And it says that these no-touch torture techniques, psychological torture, has the goal of generating maximum pressure, or at least as much as is needed to induce compliance. The difference is that the pressure is generated inside the interrogatee, the subject. It's generated inside. They don't do it. We do it to ourselves because of the psychological manipulations they're putting us through. The target's resistance is sapped. His urge to yield is fortified until, in the end, he defeats himself. I just got to make a note here. That's what's happening. And I feel it too, believe me. But when we go to the stores and we just wear a mask, we just wear it because we just can't be, like, it's too hard. We always get the eye rolls. We always get people look at us sideways. We sometimes have to have actual face-to-face confrontations with people. It's very uncomfortable. It's extremely draining. And the process is hard enough as it is, right? So we just wear the masks. We just do whatever they ask because it's easier. What are we doing when we do that? We are defeating ourselves. We are defeating ourselves. I get it. There's some places right now where you cannot get groceries unless you put the mask on. You have to do it. I understand. You're forgiven. But then do something else. Educate people while you're there. Resist something else. Go to town hall meetings. Make your objections known. Claim a medical exemption anywhere you can. Look into it because they are available. They are available. And in some cases, they will apply to you even when you think they don't. That's the case where I am. Don't defeat yourself, for goodness sake. That is the worst kind of defeat. Wouldn't you agree? Okay, this is the last excerpt I want to read you from the article. Bystanders resent and shun the sick because they make them feel anxious. The ill threaten the healthy person's sense of security and her much-needed belief in predictability, justice, and a rule of natural law. A weird thing is happening right now with bystanders. Bystanders resent and shun the sick because they make them feel anxious. Well, what happens when everybody is supposed to be sick? We are all patients. We are all sick, secretly or otherwise. What happens to that dynamic right there? Do bystanders resent and shun the sick? Or have they started resenting and shunning the healthy and strong? As I wrote here, the people who view themselves as part of the prevailing victim culture, whether consciously or not, are those most ready to submit to lockdown measures, wearing masks, and all of it. And then they look at those of us who are not wearing masks as if we are acting entitled, which is normally the purview of the victims. Because they must be saying to themselves, are the non-mask wearers really sick? Wait a second, the brain must be, if they're sick, they should be wearing a mask because they're the immunocompromised people, right? So why aren't they wearing a mask? And shouldn't they be too scared to not wear a mask if they're already sick? And why are the stores letting sick people off the hook? Wait, maybe they're lying. Maybe they're not sick and they just don't want to wear a mask, in which case I should hate them. But if they're really truly sick, I should help them. What I'm talking about here is demonstrated pretty perfectly in this CBC article, where they're talking to a man who, in spite of his cystic fibrosis and his respiratory problems, which are chronic, he has decided not to claim his medical exemption. You see what they're doing there? This guy's a hero. This guy is one of our good old traditional victims. This guy's body has been turned into a torture device for so many years that he now has absorbed the worldview of the medical system. And right now, the medical system is insisting that everybody wear masks, etc. So this guy is actually going against what is best for him so that he can please his masters, the medical system. Also, of course, bonus points. He's serving to shame other people who claim the medical exemption. This is another example of them coercing the rest of us into compliance with their medical tyranny worldview. I don't know. I hope this article by Sam Vaknin, I hope I did it justice. I hope you can see how it translates. I'll reiterate my question. Are they making us all into chronic patients who will become helpless to and even complicit in our own torture through a contrived dependence on medical experts? I think it's a very interesting question. I think Sam Vaknin's article is worth you going to read, so I'll link to that in the description box. And other than that, I'm going to stop talking now. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you would like to give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment, I love all of those things. Thank you for being here. And if you want to support my work going forward or send me a thank you for the work I've already done, you can send it to paypal.me/Polly St. George. If you want to send me cash or a check, you have to make the check out to Poly Media and check my website for my P.O. Box address. That I will link to in the description box along with the references for this video. Okay, everybody, until next time, peace out.